Looks like you shut down your presentation and like open an offensive YouTube video.
Send it out to the world.
That's right. Your name keeps flashing.
Perfect, my phone number's on it. Exactly what I was hoping for.
Okay, time for our unusually scheduled meeting, of the regular scheduled meeting of the Colorado Renewal Agency. I'll ask our secretary to call the roll.
Hopper,
Here.
Porter,
Here.
Warwick, here, Alden.
Here. All right, as always, I ask that if any of the commission members have a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda tonight, that they make it known.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Forrest.
I do not.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't either.
I'm just an idiot.
Hey, I think I'm already done. So good, all right. Noting that there were no conflict of interest tonight, I don't believe there's any special presentation tonight. We're going to handle our presentation on all this under by, right? Okay. So, having said that, then I would ask if there's anyone in the public that has any comments for the commission. Seeing none, I move to the consent calendar. I make a motion concerning disposition of the consent calendar.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Allgood,
I move that we approve the consent calendar as written.
it's been moved to approve the consent calendar as printed. Second by Ms. Warwick. Any discussion? Ask our secretary to call the roll.
Alden,
Yes.
Hopper,
Yes.
Porter,
Yes.
Warwick, yes.
Okay, that takes us to old business. Item number 1. Mr. Falk's our economic activity report.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, don't have a report. Seem to be following suit with the rest of the commissioners there.
There you go.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do have a report, and again, thank you for the opportunity to present. First on my list is the North Range for continued work with Ball Venture Southwest. On that development, I know that the city's been working very diligently with them on their annexation and the rezone, and it's my understanding that next Monday is when that goes to city council. I know that our city attorney has been working with them closely on the development agreement as part of the process. So I would anticipate that it should all be wrapped up and we're ready to go with that site. I do know that they have had a lot of activity, both what they have generated and leads that have been generated through our office, to the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, and to the Idaho Commerce Department. And we have several leads. I did submit a report to you. Several of those leads, those potential projects or actual projects tie back to the North Ranch site. So we continue to work with our partners in addressing some of those projects. They're listed in the ones that I gave you. I'm happy to address any of those if you have any questions regarding that. A couple of new projects. Project Equip is still a newer project for us, 260,000 square foot distribution facility in Sky Ranch. I'm going to put a slash next to that because we just received word from the developer that is continuing to move forward under a different name. It's Project, if I can read my writing at the bottom here, Project Trade. Again, they're looking at about a 100 to 200,000 square foot use of that of a building that we're working actually very closely with Wolf Development. They were the ones that purchased the site from the Van Ockers up to the 17 acres. They are also in the process of acquiring the 2 residential properties that are on Speed Parkway in Sky Ranch. The 260,000 square foot building, if that comes to fruition, would be located there, and they would have actually 2 access points, it looks like, onto Speed Parkway across from Mexican food. So that looks very, very promising. We're currently working on, as I mentioned, with North Ranch, 8 leads ranging from 70,000 square feet to 700,000 square feet. So we're hoping that we can secure maybe land one or, I don't know how I'm gonna fit all of those on there, but I will certainly try to. So we're looking at obviously significant, opportunities for job creation at that site and, obviously some very good investment into that location. We've obviously been working, with the city and with BVA on the infrastructure, and the city has done an incredible job in securing the water sewer throughout that North Ranch area. Road is under contract and under construction now. I think they're still hoping we get the road in before the end of the year. So with all that, we've got a site that is actually ready to go and shovel ready for any of these projects that might pop for us here in the very near future. A couple of other things that we're working on. We continue to work with Church Valley Community College, and then also the city and the airport on the A&P program, airframe and power plant program, aircraft maintenance program. So we're working with them. As you recall, there was a building that was purchased. I'm meeting with them now every other week. I understand from Public Works Director in Thornton that they're working with them on the design. There's some design layout of that building. I'm working with Carol Mitchell and also Brent. We'll be working with them on a proposed lease rate on the building that we would be bringing back for consideration. So in my understanding that they are looking at launching the program probably around this time next year. So we're excited about that program moving forward and getting that off the ground. Sorry. Continue working on the Innovation Center. The Ag Innovation Center, we've got some high level of interest from a number of different groups, including the Southwest Idaho Manufacturers Alliance, the Idaho Tech Council, University of Idaho Tech Help, and kind of a host of others have shown a great deal of interest. We're still looking for location and still looking at some opportunities through some grants, but we would anticipate that program coming on board. We're really looking at a ag type of innovation center, and we would love to be able to find a location within the current allocation area for that location. At this point, we would not be asking for any assistance and funding, which I'm sure Carol Mitchell is excited to hear that we would be trying to do something without some assistance as well as you, but we do want you to know that that is a project that we're pursuing pretty aggressively to see happen in Caldwell and specifically within the urban renewal district. So with that, a number of industrial leads. We continue to work with a couple of commercial retail leads. I know that Mr. Jenkins has been working diligently on trying to secure a few additional businesses into the downtown, as well as assisting in providing information as we submit it to site selectors for these large industrial leads we're working on. So with that, I stand for any questions. Any
questions for Mr. Collins?
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Jenkins is on vacation right now. Does anybody have any specific questions that perhaps Mr. Paul can answer on Mr. Jenkins' report? Mr. Chairman.
Steve, is anything happening on those two pads outside the theater? Has there been any interest shown? And I know that Carrie's.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, yes, that is one. The existing building is one that we show on a very, very regular basis. We do have several retailers that are looking, primarily restaurants are what we're targeting for that one site. Stephen and I paid a visit to a Meridian establishment probably 2 weeks ago. Work-related visit. And it was a situation in essence where they said they were highly interested in Caldwell, coming to Caldwell. However, everybody's still kind of reeling from the COVID-19 issue, and so while they still have a high level of interest, the cash flow is a bit challenging for them. But that is one that we're showing. I did pay a visit to a bike shop, actually yesterday, with a visit that they showed some interest in coming into Caldwell Market. An existing bike shop within the valley, they are looking, one of their challenges, they want to be in downtown Caldwell. They talked about maybe a site there or somewhere around the plaza, not in that existing building, but the other building, the new building that may be coming up, on that other pad. They said their biggest challenge is actually finding workforce. They said it's a bike shop. A lot of people think you can just pull anybody off the street, and there's some technical skill that's required with it. So they said they would have moved already had it not been that they could find employees, to fill those positions. So, yes, we're getting some looks. We're going after some restaurants that we've talked to in the past, and as things seem to get a little better, that's when we tend to go knock on the doors and see if they're ready to make it.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
that takes us to action item number 3 under, old business. This is to consider a resolution authorizing the execution of purchase and sale agreement with Ideal Demolition Services LLC for property in the Sky Range Business Center. Mr. Orman, I believe, has this for us.
Good evening. So, the last update on this was the documents were sent over sometime last week, Mr. Jenkins. We've not heard back yet from the purchaser. So that's sort of in the loop. There's some additional information that Mark asked me to share, just to touch on a couple of points that may have been questions in the past, so I'll hit those real quickly. The first is there was at some point a question about the price, the fair market value. My understanding is the Steve looked into that and they verified that the price was set appropriately. So that's good there. Second issue was there was some question about whether or not the full 8 acres would be actually developed, whether there was some more that would be just sort of used speculatively. There are going to be spec buildings built on the remaining 4 that will be built, so the BSA requires that, will not allow that land to be held for speculative purposes. So those are the 2 substantive updates I have at this point. I'm still waiting to hear back. I hope there'll be something here tonight, provide comments on the other side, but maybe that's what things are going to do. We'll certainly follow up and let you know as soon as we hear something back.
So the resolution in our packet, do we take action on that, or do we have to wait for a response on the proposal from the,
So if you're comfortable with it as written, you feel free to take action on it now. If there's a modification to this justify bringing it back here, then it would just require revisiting. But if terms were acceptable as written, it would be moving forward.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on this one? If not, what's your pleasure on the resolution? This is a resolution of the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Caldwell for approval of the purchase and sale agreement of 5221 East Main Street consisting of approximately 8.216 acres at $2 per foot.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Ford?
I would move about this resolution.
Moved by Mr. Ford for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Alden. Will the Secretary call the roll, please?
Porter?
Yes.
Warwick? Yes. Hogan?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes. We have approved the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Waterman. Let us know if any item comes back to us. We have an action item number 4 also on the Creekside update.
Yeah, I think for this particular action item, the only thing I'm going to do is just introduce Mr. Is it Pape or Pape? Pape. The presentation related to action item 5. So I think there's handouts and the PowerPoint.
Dean Cafe, 119 1199 Shoreline Drive. Yeah, some people like hard copy, some people like, I'll give you the option of the, so thank you very much. 1199 Shoreline Drive, Boise, Idaho. I acknowledge that it was sworn in. I think I went through that process.
Mike, we get to swear anyone in?
I didn't know.
You're like, is that what's up?
I've gone through this process so in speaking with Mr. Hilton, he asked that I come and speak to you today in regards to the amendment we've asked for consideration and in regards to what we've done over the past couple of months outside of dealing with the fires that comes with COVID and everything else associated with that. Our process has slowed slightly. The first document that's in your package, what we went ahead and did, very hard to read on this, hopefully easier to document that I gave you. We took the original timeline that was part of our proposal for the property, and then placed that up against what we use as an updated timeline. There's a couple of bars in there that you can see easier that are grayed out. Our original timeline talked about getting into an exclusive negotiation agreement much earlier than we actually were able to. Once we executed that agreement, we moved very quickly to get the hotel report, which is the second document that's in the package, put together and submitted through Mr. Hilton for everyone's review. I'm not sure if all of you got a chance to kind of digest that, but the high level is the hotel group that we worked with is very excited about downtown. It's very excited about what the opportunities to provide downtown for a hotel operator. The concern is with COVID overlying the hotel industry right now, they're not comfortable in trying to find financial factors that would be successful to build a new structure there. So in general, the context was they need more time for the market to come back so that they can be successful in the downtown operation and work with the city to make sure that what operations put there fits in with the ultimate goals of the area. So in conversation with Mr. Hilton and Mayor was, is the possibility of changing the agreed to phasing plan, which originally was, let's try and figure out a commercial entity, a hotel operation first, and then we'll talk about the residential parking lot. So what we did in that conversation was, we're still very confident in regards to the housing needs for downtown. What if we made that phase first, and then focused on bringing in a hotel and a hotel operator while we move forward with the residential portion. So that's really what we brought out of the report. And then it took some time to kind of digest that and discuss something like that was feasible, so it's kind of a time delay in there. And then the request came forward from us to extend the time period associated with our current agreement, which has then taken some time to get to come in front of you. So those are really the major delays, in addition to, of course, what everyone is dealing with right now with the scope of COVID. And please, if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask while I'm going through this package. I don't intend to go through the 20 or 30 pages associated with the hotel report, but I'm happy to touch on some of those. I think we've done in regards to dive into this document. I probably have the consultants joining me at one of these meetings, or I have a subsequent meeting with them. I would highlight, I believe it's almost on the very last page in regards to their recommendations, something that I think that this group and city as a whole want to consider as we look at the opportunity to bring the hotel to downtown. Get past B. So, page 22 of their document, they outline, it starts on 21 and goes to 22, but outline their recommendations in regards to what they've seen in other markets of success that are similar to the Caldwell market, in areas where they want to work with the community, the urban renewal agency, and the city as a whole. So I put those out there in regards to it will be a topic of conversation in the future that we're going to want to bring back to this group and the city as a whole. So what we have done over the past couple of months, again, outside of the slowdown with COVID, is we've looked at the original plan and refocused on the phasing plan when we got the hotel report back. And the conversation with this group and with the city is in regards to the parking garage itself and what and how are we going to make that viable, And ultimately, what we figured out is without some serious economic support from the city and urban renewal agency, it's likely not going to be something that would be feasible for the project. And the other thing noted in the hotel report is in conversations they have with the city and folks, I believe, at the urban renewal agency, there are parking lots within proximity that they would be very comfortable with having their guests park at and or facilitating transportation to and from those parking lots. So that changed our thought process in regards to, do we need a parking garage in downtown? Maybe not right now. Hopefully, we continue to grow. That's something that might be in the future. So we moved from focusing on the garage and the residential into what could we accommodate under the current code. I'm going to point out the yellow box in this slide, because we're going to move to the next slide, which shows what we're kind of currently working on. So 203 parking stalls, 92 residential units, and then some general square footages, 80,000 square feet of basically residential space, and another 7,000 square feet of retail. Actually, what we're now planning for is not building the parking garage, surface parking, but trying to keep the vision and feel of the project the same. So the parking is actually inboard and structures around it. So from the streetscape, you're not looking at a parking lot, you're looking at buildings. On the first floor being retail, residential above. Looking at the current code and with some assumptions of the unit mix, so 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and so on, our assumption with 54 parking spaces in that same kind of footprint of the parking garage before, and with how many units you can build off of that, backing into off of the 1.5 stalls per unit, we get 36 residential units. So in our kind of development mind, we go, wow, that's a 1/3 difference from what we were looking at before and what we're looking at now. And quite a drastic difference of the amount of people actually activating your downtown. So looking at almost 100 people or 100 units, which would probably constitute 200 people, down to 36, which would constitute, big year city of people living and activating downtown. Not a bad thing at all in regards to what we think the project could look like. It will still be what we feel is very successful, but it is different from what we were prescribing before. The other phases of this move forward. So in the phasing plan, this was the agreed to plan that we talked about. So the kind of hotel commercial element first, and then the residential and parking garage second. We basically swapped those. The other thing I want to point out is phase 3, we talked about the Festival Street and the conversations that we had with urban renewal in the city are, you would take on that kind of element of the project. It would be something that would be born by this project. Now, we could facilitate that, but the funding structure we're looking at, not including that going forward. And we included it in our original proposal. So, phase 1 and 2 are switched. Phase 3 is then noted in here is not assumed in part of our contract. Some visuals. So, originally the plan would be looking, I believe this would be south. Make sure I get the pointer again. So basically standing up here on the corner of Main, looking down 7th Street. So this is kind of the corner of the project that we'd be looking at. This was the original context of what that could look like. This is the vision that we brought to you guys originally. And then through this process of how much can we facilitate with the parking garage, basically cutting off 2 or 3/4, depending on how many units we can fit per floor, bringing the scale down on the entire project. Now, again, the context of this is not one big large box. It would be a similar feeling as you would get in terms of the context of the first couple of floors on this one, but the size, of course, then would change. Again, these back figures are assumptions right now. This actually sits on the existing building on that corner. We have not continued conversations with the owner of that property. This would be that hotel or other concept in the future. And the size of that likely would be similar, but maybe brought down in scale depending on what the final elevation of this project. So, in regards to next steps, and what we would think is the next thing we want to do, you guys have an amendment to our current agreement in front of you. I think that the general crux of that amendment is, and we need some time to move forward to re-engage our team on this concept of being focused on residential first and hotel in the second phase. And then we want to start actively engaging with the urban renewal district and the city, having often meetings with them to make sure the content of what we're moving forward with is continue to meet the vision of you guys selected this project from the beginning. And then we would ask the city to help outline those areas of assistance. I mentioned that third phase would be an area of the urban renewal, and the city participation in that, to make sure we're not making the wrong assumption of the financial contribution or responsibility. And then we would want to be able to go ahead and update and outline the areas of work that we would continue to be responsible for. And then the last part of this is, in those meetings going forward, we want to provide the city and the urban renewal agency with, here's an updated schedule, kind of like moving forward, with specific milestones associated with reporting back to you and the city and providing information associated with those, and an updated budget of what the project would cost. So that's kind of the big picture of where we are, what we've been doing, and what we would like to do going forward. I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cafe? I know, Mr. Cafe, I for one am really disappointed in this. It looks like we're really talking about scaling out, much less than what we originally were envisioning, and taking a whole lot longer to do that. Leading with retail, leading with residential first was not really our vision either. So I know, I for one am pretty disappointed in this, but, you have to do what you have to do, and then we have to decide if that's good enough for us or not.
So completely understand, and the economics of what we're working with right now, and I would recommend, if you haven't had the opportunity to digest that hotel report, to read through that. The hotel industry is picking up much faster than assumably. I talked with this consultant on another project on a weekly basis, and they are excited, but that could accelerate. Ultimately for us, building all of one time would be the best thing. Originally presented, the parking garage is something that would need a fair amount of financial assistance. Our understanding from the urban renewal agency and the city was that financial assistance would not be available to really support the parking garage, which I would agree with at this point. I believe the city downtown will ultimately need a parking garage, but without people paying for parking in downtown, it's tough to make it financially. The other context I would put onto that is 50-ish spaces, if we can work with the city in regards to the current code, in regards to requirements for number of spaces per unit, I would love to add more units downtown and add more size to the project downtown. So if there's a comfort level on a 1-to-1 or less than 1 per unit, that would allow this project to get much bigger and make a better project for us to that.
Any other questions for Mr. Pepper?
So what is the timeline today for this? Are we coming up on a hard timeline right now?
We're not on a hard time at this point. I digested the agreement recently, but we're asking for an additional 3 months to then come forward with agreeing to a development agreement, a DDA agreement, which then we have, there's multiple things that we have to go through to get that. One of those is a reuse of the property, which we were unable to do at the point that we received that hotel document, because it changed the context of the original project. And now we're able to produce documents so that it can be done, so the reuse appraisal can be completed.
And so, at the end of the day, we're still waiting for a final design, right? You're asking for another 3 months to 4 months for that final design?
Well, what happens during that time, the final design really goes to schematic design so that it can be finished and completed with a reuse appraisal. Then through the reuse appraisal process, then we come back and say, okay, we agree to this reuse appraisal and evaluation of purchasing the ground. Then we can enter the DDA agreement that will outline every area of responsibility between both parties. And that is where we want to come back with in February, with a finalized or a drafted DDA document.
The reason for my asking of the time, I was trying to lay it out where it would be.
Sure.
right now, it looks like end of November, and it pushed out to end of May. Am I looking at that right?
Just for the feasibility study,
Yes.
looks like it would be end of July before we have that.
And I think parts of that can be accelerated. I think ultimately our amendment is asking we get to a DDA agreement in February. We're just pushing that full time on that.
But nothing's gonna happen between now and February that makes this plan as we'll need to it, and what you are looking at now, you're reevaluating the plan for scaling it back to smaller residential units first, and then maybe something else later.
Well, I
What
think,
I'm hearing.
yeah, no, I think the conversation that we had with Mr. Hilton and the mayor was something in the future, we would have to have, they would have to have some comfort level on the keep associated with that. We would have to build something there in the future. If the hotel market hopefully comes back and has some stability, then that would be the first thing that we would plan on doing there. We need some flexibility with that, because if the hotel market never comes back, then we're also here wondering what we're doing with the vacant lot. No one wants that.
And you're looking at a single-story residential only structure.
No, it's a 3-story. It's tough to tell on that, but in context of the neighborhood, in terms of height, it actually fits within the downtown context right now. It's tough to tell on this visual that I gave you.
Sorry.
Oh, you blocked it?
Yeah, I did like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough to tell, but that blue section is 2-story, it's a 2-story volume space. That's 20 feet high with the top of another 10 feet, so you're 30, 35 feet in the air. The original structure was a 6-story structure with a parking garage in the middle of it.
So you're planning to build, including the gray area.
We're planning to build, well, I would love to build this, if there was support for a parking garage, financial support for a parking garage.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to do that. This, in terms of total square footage, is a box of what it would fit. Again, it's gonna look more like this contextually, but it's only gonna be about this tall instead of the upper 3 floors.
That looks like one-story retail, and then one level residential.
That's how many units of square footage we can fit to support with the amount of parking for the current code.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Orton?
I'm thinking, is that with 800, the 800, parking within 800 feet of the project?
That is containing all the parking on site.
Oh.
So if there's support to provide parking somewhere else, or if I missed something in our analysis, we can provide more units if there's additional parking nearby.
We should, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned.
Mr. Orton?
We should check with the planning and zoning department, because actually, I do believe in the downtown district, parking is allowed, you're allowed to count any on-street parking or city-owned parking within 800 feet of the project.
So my understanding is that our retail can qualify as not for residential.
Okay, and I'm not the guru on that, so just,
So we assume that retail could be provided on street, but we needed to provide 1.5 parking stalls per unit as an average on site. If there's something better than that, I would much prefer building 90+ units on this site. And I'll jump in first thing tomorrow with my team and make sure that our assumptions are correct.
yeah, Jerome Map could help us answer that question.
Okay.
Make sure. Anyway, hopefully I haven't provided a distraction, but it's helpful.
Anything else?
So, just so I understand, the one you presented tonight would be a 3-story?
Correct.
First level is retail, the next 2 levels are residential.
Let me go to the image to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay.
So that first 2 floors of blue is a 2-story, 20 feet tall, assuming each floor is 10 feet. It's a 20 feet of volume. And right now, we're assuming that should be retail. And then a floor of housing, but if you look down at this end, it drops and changes. And it changes around the other side of the building also.
changes to ground level apartments? Is that what you're-
No, because ground level apartments is not allowed by current code.
Gotcha.
We did talk to the city early on about live-work situation, where a person who's an accountant wants their office on the ground floor and they want to live up above. So we believe this side of the project would work really well for that. Retail would have a tough time along this corridor section, retailers that we talk to. So we would like to do a live-work opportunity on this side. So activate the ground floor just as though it is a retail housing unit on that second. So that's that 20 feet on it. And ultimately, it's probably, total height is 30 to 35 feet with parapet and mechanical.
Dean, just real quick, to give us a bit of an imaginary visual,
Sure.
how does that compare with the height of the Amano restaurant across the street? Are they roughly the same height?
It would be tall.
So we wouldn't have this distracting, one is at one elevation and one is,
Yeah, and that's, in terms of context for downtown, it actually fits with the context of what downtown is right now, in terms of height of the building. This you would see everywhere, basically, it'd be it would be the tallest building. I'd like to do it. I'd like to bring more activity and more people living downtown, the demand is growing for it. I would love it if I'm wrong in regards to the context of parking on site. I will be back to you, if you guys are meeting tomorrow, I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll get it up, if we want to do the whole thing, if we are wrong with our original assumption.
So, I feel like I don't know what I'm missing, but I feel like I don't have enough information here.
And I think that's part of my concern too, is we've been a year on this, RFP now, this iteration, and we're sort of rethinking the RFP all over again, so, feels like we lost a year.
Yeah.
So, we have an option here of extending this RFP and running this without they come back to us with something in February that thinks is gonna work. We can cut our losses and start over again, or perhaps somebody else that might have deeper pockets and ready to go for it and take a bigger risk on this, or what's your pleasure? We've got options.
I wish I knew what, maybe it's, maybe I'm just not understanding, what's the deadline we're looking at if we did not include the,
So the current agreement expires next month? This one?
Sometime imminently, yeah.
Yeah.
The deadline would be, the consequence of allowing the deadline to come, allowing, not extending this would be, as articulated by Chairman Hopper, that basically you'd be saying, okay, this relationship is not working out. The consequence would not be to force the hand, of Mr. Property and have dirt start getting moved at the time.
But if I understand going through this process to this point, the vision, the hope is to bring in a hotel to help activate part of this area.
That's a part of it.
One of the goals.
One of the goals.
I'm working with 3 separate hotel groups right now, including the group that submitted the document and research, and all of them have said, we don't plan to put a shovel in the ground for 2 to 5 years. Because there's going to be so much product out there that's going to be there. And that's where our plan of attack changes when we got that report. Along with parking. Those are our Achilles heels.
and when we were preparing to do our most recent request for qualifications or whatever, I thought we had kind of said, you live with or without a hotel, because the hotel seemed to be a real sticking point prior to the situation. and it kind of sounds to me like, again, a hotel is a sleeping point.
So I don't know that it's a sticking point. The concern I have is that we didn't, something that has activated for essentially almost exclusive residential is not big on my list. That's why we need to know that law. So that's my concern. I need residential downtown. I don't deny that, but this particular property should be more geared toward the retail and being an economic booster.
And I 100% agree with you, and I'm also worried that a hotel wouldn't put a shovel in the ground for 2 to 5 years. That leaves a fair lot for a very long time.
I understand that there's a reluctance in the hotel industry for, in general, investing. I think we all know that hotel opportunities and hotel space in our town, as it's booming, is practically non-existent. And so, to generalize that, I think somebody's not looking at the whole picture, or the local picture. And that's part of my concern.
I would echo what you say and report that as what you say. But to get a financial institution to back that, all they're gonna look at is a report that says, look at all the vacancy in Idaho.
Yes, no, I understand. I understand when you're dependent on that kind of external financing, that's what you're talking about.
And you made a comment about flexibility with that building, and the flexibility was commercial.
Right.
The commercial market is harder to make the rent work to support a brand new building. It's an office space, a brand new office space. So we looked into that early on in the process.
So we said 120 days to get a holding concept for downtown, this place basically, what we're looking at.
That's probably either way, whether we go with Pathways Group or whether we strike out on our own and try to do, or just we have a sense of what we got.
Mr. Chairman, I'd really like to hear more clarification on the parking situation. What might be allowable, and I think, we're in with Mr. Pape's group for 9 months to a year now. So 3 months isn't going to cause us to stumble. I think we better get all the facts and all the details, have those in hand before we make a decision. I know an awful lot of work has gone into this already. As a citizen, I find it very frustrating that there's nothing there already. And that feeling's not going to go away in the next 3 months. So I think we should give them the time that they're asking for and have all the facts in hand before we come to a conclusion.
I can live with that.
Just as an alternative approach, I mean, you don't have to go far in the communities around us to see that people are investing in a lot of things. Among them are hotels, among them are larger retail, among them are downtown type structures. It's happening all around us. And we can't see this one and start it. So, I don't know why it's so difficult, but it's happening everywhere else, and COVID has its own. Happening all around us.
Do you have a response to what you just said?
Very question.
It's happening all around us.
We're actively building 175 units in downtown Boise right now. We slog through the process. What usually would be a 3-month permitting process turns into 8. We work through it.
That's why you should work with us or not.
I would love to build this
structure.
Trust me, if I could build that, I would. My Achilles heel right now is I can't build a parking structure to support that. if we missed something, I'll come back to you guys next week if you want a meeting, and I'll say, we can do that. I mean, if that one small piece, if we're wrong about, we'll immediately go back to what we were on that. Immediately. That's what we want. And I'm not disagreeing, it's booming right now. But not every financial institution we do rely on says, boy, it's gonna keep booming. Everyone says, what is the COVID effect now on the financial market? How much risk is everyone going to take?
And I have a problem with apartment renters parking on the street and in public parking, you know, I mean, I think everybody should have, if you have a house, you should have a parking spot for the house, you know.
But you need 1.5, or do you need 1?
And we've been surprised on projects that have gone from 1 to 0.5 in terms of actual use over the past 4 years. But it's ever changing.
So Robert, do you have something?
Chairman and Commission, I'm wondering if there aren't questions that could be answered sooner than 4 months from now, maybe 1 month from now. It sounds like there may be more willingness to extend things for a month to get some of those questions answered than there is for 4 months to get those questions answered. There's sufficient energy potentially to get that done at least for a month. I don't think you're necessarily prohibited from having a resolution that extends this for a month rather than 4. Just if 4 months is a make or break issue, and 3 months is not, or 2 months is not, or 1 month is not, I just want that on the table. I think it'd be acceptable to modify the amendment to shorten length of time so that the commission feels like if any questions answered, you'd like to have an opportunity to respond to those questions without necessarily pushing it quite so far down the road. That's just a thought.
Would there be, because I'm going through this DDA process to other jurisdictions right now, this extension is to include that completion of the draft DDA. I think what I would recommend is in a month, we come back with something that looks better than just some boxes, and hopefully it answers some of these scale questions that you guys have. And maybe I can accelerate or at least get more confidence in our hotel operators to say, okay, we think it was 2 to 5 years, but maybe it's more like breaking ground, and so they can open in 2 to 5 years.
And I think that's the part that's missing most for me, Mr. Pompey, is, you know, when are things really gonna happen? We're gonna build one building and then 5 years, it's should sit vacant with dirt for 5 years on the rest of it, and you know, that's, you know, we have some kind of, reasonably hard dates when things are going to happen, and we can see what's gonna happen with the entire development. That would be much more powerful than, you know, well, let's build one and see how it goes.
Completely understand.
That's just not the vision we have.
Would there be consideration with what's considered the hotel portion right now, going to the highest and best use at that time of content? So if hotel market never comes and support for commercial doesn't come, so we're still very interested in activating a ground floor of retail with residential, would that be a consideration?
It might be, you know, again, we have to sit here and know, whatever we do on this block, it's a 100-year deal.
I agree.
And so if we do it wrong, guess what? It's done.
I agree.
So, and you know how landlocked our downtown is. We just don't have a lot of opportunity for getting the elements of the downtown that we feel like we need to have to be vibrant and stay vibrant. So those are my concerns. If we're not addressing those, and we're just doing pieces and parts of it, then, you know, it's a lost opportunity, and, yeah, we didn't do what we were supposed to.
Well, I don't mind downtown residential, I don't think that should be focused. Commercial use is focused.
And in the centerpiece of that which, you know, I'm not sure that's the vision. It's good to be local, it's good to be close, but right in the center of the major activity, I'm not not sure that's where the residential.
Yeah, we have one piece, this next opportunity that you guys allow me to take on. I come back with the financial plan and the sources and uses associated with that financial plan to show, here's how this can be done. Here's the sources that are going to give us on that. Sounds like there's some angst in our ability to bring that financial structure forward.
Well, we're hearing it from you. I mean,
Well, a parking garage is a loss leader, that's what you're contending. That's why we came to the city and urban renewal, that you are a better owner of that than we are, because we can't take the tax funding off of any other property without support it. The private side has to still pay the tax and not take the income off the garage, because no one's charging for parking right now. So it's a loss situation. So I would be, my grandfather rolled over in his grave, if I came to the building, I could build a parking garage, they could successful downtown, we could build a residential.
I understand that, and we understand, we know that as well. I mean, but, yeah. I think if parking isn't the sticking point, then there's other opportunities for us to fix that, not necessarily bond this site. Great, so, you know, we should talk more about that. We should be talking with what options are there, and what we need. I don't know that it needs to be right on the site.
So, we've had a number of different lengths of terms thrown out here. How long do you need to come back with what you were talking about? How long works for you?
Williams with the baby in 60 days. I'll come back in 30 days with an update. Here's more information that we found, or whatever the next meeting is. And I think we may find out some stuff pretty quickly. And I can work with staff, both on the city and the urban renewal side, to figure out that there's other locations that can support parking needs, be it for hotels or other functions. And I can come back fairly quickly and say, we're back on track in regards to the mass that we can put there, and the vision that we had, here's how we're going to be able to do that. At the same time, here's a timeline from now to completion of the project that we believe we can be successful with. And here's a financial plan to do that now.
Mr. Waterman?
To accomplish an update in 1 month with the ability to make a decision at that point, the actual extension probably should be 2 months. It may be the case, Mark would know better than I, that to accomplish negotiating, entering into the DDA requires a full 4 months. But making the extension for 2 months, so the return a month from now, will give you the option at that point to say, okay, you like what we see, we'll give you the 4 months from today to negotiate the DDA. Or if not, you're only bound by the extension until 30 days from the next meeting, essentially. So if that's what you would like to do, a report in a month with the ability to make a decision shortly thereafter, a 2-month extension seems like the best way to go.
And we can do that 2-month extension verbally then, because it doesn't match what we got.
So,
resolution.
I would say the resolution should be resolved to authorize you to enter into an extension of 2 months. Then Mark and I'll take the document, make sure it's reflective of what we have resolved to do, give that to them for review, and then you would be authorized at that point to sign, even though the actual exact document is not here. State your intention and be authorized by that.
Okay. Everybody follow that? So, need a motion to extend the existing relationship for 2 months, and instruct legal to draw up those documents and authorize the chairman to sign it after that document is signed. Moved by Ms. Warwick, second by Mr. Porter. Any further discussion? So, I guess we should call the roll on this. It's not really a resolution.
Warwick? Yes. Allman?
Yes.
Hopper?
Yes.
Porter?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you all, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You
you want these returned to you?
So, that means that, item 5 will be executed later, when that document is prepared. And so that takes us to new business, item number 1, residential. Our invoices for the month of October.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Tonight you have before you a request to approve $174,231.60 in invoices. The invoices being presented tonight are $18,000 for the economic development support, $5,940 for our legal fees for the month, some repair work done at 215 South Kimball for $291.60. And then, the hire reimbursed program, this is the facade improvements in downtown, and is it mainly just facade?
Facades, and I can't remember if we had fire reimbursement in this room.
Yeah, so this is that $150 that we had in our budget, and we committed to providing that support to, for that. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Mitchell? If not, I entertain a motion for approval of the invoices.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Earl.
I move that we, pay the amount as described by Finance Director.
We move to pay invoices for October. Is there a second? By Mr. Porter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Takes us to the treasurer's report, Ms. Mitchell.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, you have, Chairman, you have before you tonight the treasurer's report. We'll start in the box and work our way up to the top. So currently, you have $15,129,303.29. It is in 3 accounts. The one account is the LGIC account for $116,264.76. Banner Bank CD for $260,380.49. And then your operating account of $14,762,675.04. That operating account breaks down into the following categories. We have the restricted use for the other tax interests, their increment of $11,538,582.64. The increment for the city project of $1,931,639.03. Our TDCC account, that's the rental income when we had TDCC, of $723,245.86. And then restricted for our land account of $569,207.51. These numbers might have a little bit of a change when you see them come through in the audit report, because we're still working through the audit to finalize these numbers, but we're real close on what you're seeing here to be in the audit. And yes, audit is underway. It is going to be a bit of a challenge this year, because the auditors are going to do it virtually. And so now, instead of handing them the file and saying, here you go, we now have to copy it, scan it, and put it out in a portal. A little more work this year.
Yeah, but it's virtual money now, too. Okay, any questions for Ms. Mitchell on the financial report? Entertain a motion then for approval of the financial report.
No.
Moved by Ms. Hilton. Second by Mr. Porter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Got it. Okay. Mr. Waterman, you have some updates to us on our ongoing projects? Please.
Alrighty, so, on 711 Cleveland Boulevard, just today we got the, reuse appraisal, to our office, and we're gonna look over that here shortly, but the, came in at negative $750K. 750,000, negative. Which my understanding is the expectation was that it would be some number with a negative part of it.
Yes.
The consequence of which would be that the purchase price itself was zero, despite the fact, and that not being accomplished with the, settlement market value. So So we'll take a look at that, just to make sure it's, everything should be, but, sounds like it's more or less within the general scope of what was expected. Mr. Russell wants to get started very soon, because it's, the seasonal change, and so, Mark has to let you know that probably between now and the next meeting, we'll be, we'll be closing on that. Along with that, we'll be moving forward next to the option on the Wells property, the adjacent property, and that's also part of the settlement agreement. So that's where that's at. Any questions on that?
Any questions? Ms. Warren? Good.
Okay, very good.
Next one is Arthur and Kimball, Sunday Brewing site.
We are still waiting to hear back. The last word on that was, agreements were being worked out with, architect, engineering, firms to try to move, forward with getting a reuse appraisal put together. Mark said that he had reported that to you at the last meeting. We just don't have any additional updates, but, I know the inquiry is out. We'll get back soon. So, that's where that is. On the new urban renewal area, there's been a recent, sort of surprise bump in the road of sorts, that I'll talk about in general terms, and Mr. Bolt wants to get some more specific, about to do that. But there is some concern about the amount of, the cost of bringing sufficient power out to the area, to service it. And so that is being addressed, looked at more closely to see whether or not that's going to be a sufficient hurdle to make the sort of plan go through a more wholesale change. Do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I met last week with representatives from Intermountain Gas and also from Idaho Power. One of the concerns of the site as we're heading, as shown on the map, is there actually is no natural gas lines through that area. The best route for them to take would be bringing a line south, from the north to the south on Old Highway 30 and moving it over this direction, approximately 7.5 miles, in order to get a 6-inch steel, high-pressure line in that would need to be servicing the industrial prospects there. They gave us a timeline of about 9 months to do that, and the price tag, they said probably between $3 and $4 million. That's just for the natural gas to get it to the site. Also, Idaho Power shared with us their timing could be anywhere from 12 to 24 months. I'm getting different comments back from them, some saying that we're probably looking at $2 to $3 million. Others stating that a substation similar to what they did put into Sky Ranch might be required out there, which I didn't get a price on that. So again, we're probably looking at a timeline of at least 9 months to get those services to place, and anywhere from $4 to $8 million just to get the lines to the site. Hope that helps.
No, it doesn't help at all. Knowing about it helps, but it doesn't help.
Anyway, we'll staff will keep looking at it, trying to sort out exactly which part that would be when it comes. Those are my things this evening.
Mr. Waterman. Just a couple of updates from me. Mr. Russell may have noticed, we're already flying around that building. There's been some concerns with that gray and vinyl color. I'm sure it's not. It will be sort of lying with the downtown color for our strategy. But, yeah, we've got, so, whether or not we do the North Renewal area project or not, may depend on how much infrastructure needs to be there, how quickly, and how we can fund it, whether it's, raising a good share of your renewal equipment to, future pay for the first industrial use out there. So we're looking at some other options as well, and perhaps some other smaller localized, renewal areas to attract as well, so. There's a couple of, blighted areas in how we can sell, just a bit with that, so we're kind of not giving up on it yet, but, we've got a little more, about what it's gonna cost to get a little more, say for sure we're ready to go. Okay. Any other commissioners with anything to report, any questions? You're all good? All right, then, if you don't want to stay the rest of the night, I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Warwick. Second by Mr. Allgood. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? We're done.
Goodbye.
Have that